A man is jogging through the forest when he realizes he's lost. After a while, he spots another man jogging in the same area. Desperate for help, the first man asks the second for directions. The second man says, "Sure, I've got a truck nearby. We can take him to the city." The first man, relieved, assumes the second man must be camping with his truck nearby. But then the second man squats down slightly and glances over at him. "Are you getting in?" he asks. The first man, sensing something's off, hesitates. Before he can say anything, the second man pulls out a gun and threatens, "Get in the truck or I'll make you." Realizing he's dealing with a madman, the first man has no choice but to comply. The two men squat down together and begin running through the forest. After a while, they reach a small security cabin, where a police officer is standing outside. The officer steps forward and asks what's going on. The first man quickly explains, "This guy is forcing me to get into a truck, and he's out of his mind." The officer nods, arrests the second man, and tells the first man to come with him. "We'll take my motorcycle. You can ride in the sidecar, or the satire, cuss," the officer says. The first man agrees, relieved. But then the officer squats down and looks at him, saying, "Get in. You can't stay out here. People just escaped from the psychiatric hospital at the edge of the forest, and they'll find you." The first man, now more confused than ever, squats next to the officer, and they begin running together. As they jog low to the ground, the first man mutters, "Damn, I should have stayed in the truck." A wife rushes home to find that the building where she lives has caught fire. It's surrounded by firefighters and police officers, all preventing anyone from getting through. Panicked, she pushes forward, shouting that her husband is still inside. A firefighter tries to calm her, telling her he's sorry, but everyone who was inside is already dead. The wife becomes even more hysterical, insisting on going in to find her husband. The firefighter explains that because of the fire, all the bodies are burned beyond recognition, their skin coal black, and she won't be able to identify anyone. But the wife insists, "I've been married to him for 20 years. I know every inch of him. I can tell him apart." Finally, the firefighter reluctantly agrees to let her in. She approaches the first body bag, opens it, and reaches down. That's not him," she says. She moves to the second body bag, repeats the process, and says, "Nope, that's not him either." Finally, she opens the third body bag and again reaches down. This time, she pauses for a moment. After a long silence, she says, "This guy isn't even from this building." One dark night in Dublin, a fire broke out at the local chemical plant. In the blink of an eye, the blaze exploded into massive flames. The alarm was sounded, and fire departments from miles around rushed to the scene. When the firefighters arrived, the president of the chemical company ran up to the chief and said, "All our secret formulas are locked in a vault at the center of the plant. They must be saved. I'll offer £50,000 to the fire department that rescues them intact." Despite the efforts of the fire crews, the flames were too intense. As the fire spread, more departments were called in. The president raised the reward to £100,000, but still no one could break the release through the flames. Then, from a distance, a lone siren was heard. It was the rural volunteer fire brigade from a nearby township, mostly made up of men over 65 years old. To everyone's surprise, the old rundown fire truck sped past all the newer, sleeker engines and drove straight into the heart of the inferno without hesitation. The other firefighters watched in awe as the elderly brigade fought back the fire with skill and determination, saving the vault and its precious contents in no time. The grateful company president immediately increased the reward to £200,000 and rushed over to thank the heroic team. A TV crew caught the moment on film and asked Patty, the 70-year-old fire chief, "What are you going to do with all that money?" Patty smiled and replied, "Well, the first thing we're going to do is fix the brakes on that damn fire truck." The IRS decides to audit Grandpa, so they summon him to the office. Grandpa shows up with his attorney as expected. The auditor looks at Grandpa and says, "Sir, you have an extravagant lifestyle, but no full-time employment. You've told us you win money gambling, but that's hard to believe." Grandpa smiles and says, "I'm a great gambler and I can prove it. How about a demonstration?" The auditor, intrigued but skeptical, says, "Okay, show me." Grandpa starts, I'll bet you $1,000 that I can bite my own eye. The auditor, thinking there's no way, agrees to the bet. Grandpa promptly removes his glass eye and bites it. The auditor's stunned. Grandpa smirks and says, "Now I'll bet you $2,000 that I can bite my other eye." The auditor, still reeling from the first trick but sure he knows the trick, accepts the bet. Grandpa removes his dentures and proceeds to bite his good eye. The auditor's speechless. Grandpa, now with a twinkle in his eye, says, "All right, how about double or nothing? I'll bet you $6,000 that I can stand on one side of your desk and pee into the wastebasket on the other side without getting a drop anywhere else." The auditor, twice burned, is cautious. But after looking carefully, he figures there's no way Grandpa could pull that off. So he agrees. Grandpa stands beside the desk, unzips his pants, and starts to try to pee into the wastebasket. However, despite his best efforts, he ends up urinating all over the auditor's desk. The auditor jumps up, absolutely thrilled, realizing he's just won big. But Grandpa's attorney, watching in horror, buries his head in his hands. The auditor, still smiling, turns to the attorney and says, "Are you all right?" The attorney sighs deeply and mutters, "Not really. This morning, Grandpa bet me $25,000 that he could come in here and pee all over your desk, and that you'd be happy about it." A television crew arrives at a farm to interview the shepherd about his daily routine. "Our viewers would love to know what a typical day looks like out here in the countryside," says the reporter. "Could you start from the very beginning?" "Sure," the shepherd replies. "Well, first I wake up, but I don't really feel like getting out of bed, so I have a sip of my brandy to kickstart the day. Then I have to go outside to release the sheep, but I'm still a little sleepy, so I take 2 more sips to get me moving and 1 more to help me open the gate. Out in the field, I usually meet my friend, and we drink 2 whole bottles of brandy together, and then—" "Oh, I'm sorry," interrupts the reporter, "but we can't really air that. Children are watching, and we don't want to make a bad impression. How about this? Instead of drinking, you can say you read a book every time?" The shepherd thinks for a moment and agrees, "Yeah, that makes sense." He starts over, now and more carefully. "Well, first thing in the morning, I wake up and read a page of my book. Then I go outside and read 2 more pages, plus 1 more, while opening the gate for the sheep. Out in the field, I usually meet my buddy, and we read 2 whole books together. Then we return home, reading page after page, and lock the sheep in the barn. Finally, at the end of the day, we go to town where my friend has a library, and we read until the morning." An old man is celebrating his 80th birthday, and his grandson decides to give him a special gift by taking him to a brothel. The grandson speaks to the madam and explains, "It's my grandpa's 80th birthday today, and he's never been to a brothel before. Can you help him have a memorable time?" The madam smiles and says, "Don't worry, I'll arrange for someone gentle who'll show him something exciting." She takes the old man to a room and tells him to get undressed and lie down on the bed. "Brandy will be here in a minute," she says. Soon, Brandy, a beautiful redhead, enters the room. "I hear it's your birthday," she says with a smile. "We're going to do something special. Have you ever heard of 69? The old man replies, "No, I haven't." Brandy laughs and says, "Don't worry, you'll enjoy it." She begins to undress and lifts her leg over his face. Just as she does, she lets out a little fart. She quickly pulls her leg back and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry." She tries again, lifting her leg over his face, but once more, another little fart escapes. She pulls her leg back again, apologizing profusely. At this point, the old man starts getting dressed, much to Brandy's confusion. "Where are you going?" she asks. The old man responds, "Lady, I can't take 67 more of those." On the first contact mission to Mars, 2 astronauts were sent to make contact with extraterrestrial beings. After 300 long days in the spaceship, they finally landed on Mars. What they saw deeply surprised them. 2 beautiful humanoid figures, welcoming them with open arms. The astronauts spent a few days exploring the lovely planet. When it was time for them to leave, the figures that greeted them threw a goodbye party. There was dancing and much fun. The female astronaut was asked to dance by one of the Martians. But soon she realized the Martian was a horrible dancer. He kept stepping on her toes and couldn't keep up with the rhythm. Frustrated, the Martian finally said, I know I'm a bad dancer, but if you press my nose, I'll be able to keep the rhythm better. The female astronaut, curious, pressed his nose, and to her surprise, the Martian started dancing much better. But then he said, I'm sorry I keep stepping on your feet, but if you tap my stomach, I won't step on your feet anymore. She did, and soon the Martian was the best dancer at the party. After a while, the astronauts had to say their goodbyes. On the ride back to Earth, the female astronaut couldn't stop talking about how beautiful the planet was and how lovely it was dancing with the Martian. After a bit of silence, the male astronaut spoke up. I agree, the planet was beautiful, but dancing with those Martian women was horrible. They kept hitting my nose and punching me in the stomach. A man went to stay with his best friend for the weekend. That first night, his friend cooked hamburgers for dinner. As the man was eating, he noticed some suspicious stains on his plate. Hey, he said, trying not to be rude. Is this plate clean? Clean as cold water can get it, his friend replied casually. The man raised an eyebrow but shrugged it off. The next night, they had hot dogs. Again, the man noticed his plate had crusty bits of food stuck to it. He asked once more, You're sure this plate is clean? Clean as cold water can get it, came the same reply. The next morning, his cereal bowl felt greasy, and he couldn't take it anymore. He pushed the bowl aside, walked over to his friend, and said, Seriously, are your dishes actually clean? His friend smiled and said, Clean as cold water can get them? Just then, the dog ran into the room, jumping excitedly onto the guest. His friend shouted, Down, cold water! Down! A doctor had a rather unusual business model. He charged $50 per visit, but if he couldn't cure the patient, he'd pay them $500. One day, a man walked in and said, Doctor, I've lost my sense of taste. The doctor handed him a small jar. Take a spoonful of this, he said. The man took a taste, immediately gagged, and spat it out. Ugh, this is shaving foam. The doctor calmly replied, Well, your taste seems perfectly fine. That'll be $50. A couple of weeks later, the same man returned. Doctor, I think I'm developing Alzheimer's. The doctor handed him the same jar and said, Take a spoonful of this. The man frowned. Wait a second, this is shaving foam again. The doctor smiled. Looks like your memory is working just fine. That'll be $50. 2 months later, the man came back, clearly determined. Doctor, he said, I've lost my eyesight this time. The doctor sighed and said, Well, I'm afraid I don't have a cure for that. Here's $500. The man grabbed the money, overjoyed, and then frowned. Hey, wait a minute. This is just $5. The doctor raised an eyebrow. Looks like your vision is just fine. That'll be $50. When 4 of Santa's elves came down with the flu, the trainee elves couldn't make toys nearly as fast. Production slowed, and Santa began to feel the pressure of falling behind schedule. Then Mrs. Claus reminded him that her mother was coming to stay for the entire holiday season. Santa was really starting to stress. He went to harness the reindeer, only to find that 3 were about to give birth and 2 had jumped the fence and disappeared. He sighed, went back inside to get things ready for loading the sleigh. And as he hoisted the toy bag, the bottom fell out, spilling toys everywhere. Tired and frazzled, Santa trudged into the kitchen for a calming cup of cider and maybe a shot of rum. But the cupboard was bare. The elves had hidden the liquor. Flustered, he accidentally dropped the cider pot, shattering it into hundreds of pieces across the floor. He muttered some very un-Santa-like words and went to grab the broom, only to discover that mice had eaten the bristles. And then the doorbell rang. Dragging his feet, Santa opened the door. Standing there was a bright-eyed little angel holding a giant Christmas tree. The angel chirped, Merry Christmas, Santa. Isn't it a lovely day? I brought you this beautiful tree. Now, where would you like me to stick it? And that, boys and girls, is how the tradition of the angel on top of the Christmas tree began. A plumber hobbles down the street with his leg in a cast when he bumps into a friend. His friend asks, What on earth happened to you? The plumber sighs and says, Well, it's a bit of a story. This guy had promised his wife he'd fix the sink, but on the day he realized he'd have to stay late at work. So he called me and gave me his house key to do the job while he was gone. I got there, crawled under the kitchen sink, and started working. A while later, the wife came home. She saw my legs sticking out from under the cabinet and, assuming it was her husband, decided to surprise him with some intimate attention. Just then, the phone rang, so she got up to answer it. When she came back, she looked furious and yelled, "That was my husband on the phone. Who are you?" I was so startled, I jerked up and cracked my head on the pipes. Knocked myself out cold. When I came to, I was being loaded into an ambulance. Apparently, she had pulled me out, fixed my pants, and called 911. But here's the kicker. When the paramedics asked what had happened, I told them, and they laughed so hard they dropped me off the stretcher. That's when I broke my leg. An old man and his wife are walking through the county fair when they spot a booth offering helicopter rides for $50. The man says, "I've always wanted to ride in a helicopter." "I'm not getting any younger," his wife replies. "Absolutely not. $50 is $50. Every year they return to the fair, and every year the man pleads for the ride, and every year his wife reminds him, $50 is $50. Finally, after several years, the old man says to the pilot, "I don't know if I'll live to see another fair. I've always dreamed of riding in a helicopter, but my wife just won't let me spend the money." The pilot, overhearing, says, "Tell you what, I'll take you both up for free. But there's a catch. If either of you makes a sound, even one word, I'll have to charge you the $50. The couple agrees. Once in the air, the pilot pulls every stunt he knows. Dives, spins, barrel rolls, and everything short of crashing. Not a peep. They land safely, and the pilot turns around, shaking his head in disbelief. "I have to admit," he says, "I did every crazy maneuver I could think of, but you never said a word. I'm impressed." The old man smiles and says, "Well, I almost said something when Myrtle fell out, but $50 is $50. On a scorching summer day, the Pope decides to take a cold shower to cool off. As the water runs down, he's overcome by a worldly urge. So he gives in, and just as he releases the holy seed, he notices a glint of light through the open window. A camera lens flashing from across the street. Mortified, he hits the shower intercom and roars, "Find whoever's photographing me, now!" Within the hour, the Swiss Guard drags in a man with a massive telephoto lens and a smug grin. "How much for the camera?" the Pope demands. "Well," the man says, "with what I've just captured, I can sell these shots to every tabloid on Earth. Let's say 5 million euros. "I'll give you 1 million, the Pope growls, "and I guarantee my guards won't make you vanish if you never speak of this again." The man agrees, takes the cash, and leaves the camera behind. Later that day, the Pope's cleaner's tidying up and notices the camera on his desk. "Oh, Your Holiness, that's a big camera. Was it expensive?" The Pope sighs. 1 million euros. She shakes her head and says, "Well, they must have seen you coming." A blonde, a nun, a Brit, and a Frenchman are sitting together in a train carriage. Suddenly, the train enters a tunnel. It's pitch black for a moment, and in the silence, there's the unmistakable sound of a loud slap. When the train emerges into the light, the Frenchman is holding his reddened cheek, looking utterly confused. The nun thinks, "That French scoundrel must have tried to grope the blonde. Good for her for slapping him." The blonde thinks, "That creep must have gone for me, missed, and grabbed the nun by mistake, and she slapped him for it." The Frenchman thinks, "That Brit must have touched one of them, and they thought it was me." The Brit thinks, "Can't wait for the next tunnel. I'm gonna smack him even harder." One day, a boy nervously asked a girl, "So, how about we, have some fun? At my place?" The girl smiled and said, "Yeah, sure." The boy hesitated for a moment and explained, "Okay, but there's one thing. I sleep in a bunk bed with my younger brother, and, well, he thinks we're making sandwiches when I bring someone over. So we need a code. If you want to go faster, say cheese. And if you want it harder, say tomato. Got it?" The girl giggled and agreed, thinking the whole thing was kind of funny. Later that night, as things heated up, the girl began enthusiastically yelling, "Cheese! Cheese! Tomato! Tomato!" From the top bunk, the younger brother suddenly groaned and shouted, "Stop making sandwiches already. You're getting mayo all over my bed." A man finds himself crawling through the desert, having gotten lost after taking his SUV for some off-roading fun. He had been zipping through the Badlands and over sand dunes, but then he hit a big rock, and his SUV wouldn't start. His cell phone was useless, no signal, and he had no family to call. His parents had died in an accident a few years ago, and his friends had no idea he was out there. His water ran out, and with no other options, he poured some windshield wiper fluid into his bottle. He crawled through the desert until nightfall, feeling groggy and exhausted. Eventually, he passed out. When he wakes up, the ground is cold and hard. He opens his eyes to find himself lying on stone, staring at a huge snake wrapped around a audit. The man screams, but the snake quickly reassures him. Shh, don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you. Who are you? The man asked, still shaken. I'm Nate, the snake replies. And who are you? Oh, my name's Jack, the man says. Well, Jack, welcome to the Garden of Eden. The stick I'm coiled around is the staff of life. It's a lever, and if I pull it, it will end all of humanity. I've been guarding this since the dawn of time. My job is to protect it until I die, and when I do, I'll pass it on to my son, Sammy. You should meet him, Nate calls out, and a smaller rattlesnake slithers over from behind a pile of rocks. Hi, the little snake says brightly. Hello, and you must be Sammy, named after Samuel, I assume? Jack asks. Yep, Sammy replies with a nod. Nate, could you do me a favor? Nate asks. Could you show Sammy around the world? He told me about his first adventure, and I wanted to see the world so badly. There are so many places to visit. The Grand Canyon, the cities, the forests. I want Sammy to see it all before he's stuck here guarding this lever for eternity. Jack, feeling moved by the request, agrees. Yeah, sure. Nate looks at his son and then back at Jack. Thank you, Jack. I want only two things. First, show Sammy the world. Second, when it's time, I want you to end my life. It's my time to go. Jack feels a bit depressed but agrees to honor Nate's wishes. Sammy excitedly goes off to pack for the journey, and soon they're off exploring the world together. A few years later, Sammy is ready to return, but Jack, remembering Nate's request, tells him, let's keep going a little longer. They continue to travel for a few more years before finally heading back to see Nate. But Jack, being a bit of an idiot, decides to drive his new car through the desert again. On the way back to Nate's lever, he gets stuck in the sand. After some time, he finally makes his way back to the spot, but this time, he realizes that Nate is lying a little too close to the lever, just 20 feet away, in fact. Nate is sleeping, and Jack finds himself at a crossroads. He has to choose between killing his old friend or letting the lever end humanity. After a long pause, Jack makes a decision. Better Nate than lever, he yells as he drives over Nate, crushing him under the wheels of his car. Carruthers and Blenkinsop had been lost in the desert for many days. That morning, they'd finished the last of their water. Blenkinsop sighed. Carruthers, old chap, to be perfectly honest, it looks like we're done for. Carruthers, ever the optimist, replied, You're probably right, old fellow, but never say die, what? You never know what lies beyond the next sand dune. Prophetic words indeed, for over the next rise, they spotted what appeared to be an Arab market in the distance. Summoning the last of their strength, they made for it. At the first stall, they asked breathlessly, Good day to you, do you have any water? No, replied the vendor, but I do have this delightful dessert, a trifle of fruit and sponge cake topped with custard, whipped cream, and colored sugar sprinkles. Beautiful, no? Carruthers and Blenkinsop agreed it looked delicious, but not exactly thirst-quenching, and moved on. At the next stall, same story. No water, just trifles. As it was at the next, and every other stall in the market. Nothing but layer upon layer of custard, sponge, and cream. Eventually, Carruthers and Blenkinsop staggered out of the bazaar, parched and perplexed. Well, Carruthers, said Blenkinsop, it seems we are done for. Yes, said Carruthers, but I must say that was the strangest market I've ever seen. Blenkinsop nodded gravely. Yes, it was a trifle bizarre. Ricardo grew up in Milan, and on his 16th birthday, his father, Antonio, presented him with a family heirloom, a handmade hunting rifle. It had been crafted by Antonio's father, the founder of the Roll Carabiner Company, shortly after World War II. It was a proud moment, marking a rite of passage, and Ricardo treasured the rifle, practicing with it frequently. One day, while at the shooting range, he met a stunning English girl named Neve. They locked eyes, and it was love at first sight. Ricardo, in broken English, nervously asked her for coffee, and to his delight, she said yes. Though they both struggled with each other's language, her Italian was minimal and his English was shaky. They spent hours laughing and chatting, enjoying the simplicity of their connection. She called him Rick and told him she was in Milan for the shooting championships, which would last a week. As they walked back to her hotel, their romantic moment was interrupted by her furious father standing outside. He immediately stormed up to Ricardo, shouting, "Stay away from my daughter!" But Nev, with defiance in her eyes, screamed, "No, Daddy, I love him!" Her father, fuming, ordered, "Go inside!" Then, turning to Ricardo, he warned, "If I ever see you again, you better have an expensive gift for my daughter, or I swear you'll never see her again." Crushed, Ricardo returned home, unable to afford a fancy gift for Nev, but after thinking for a while, an idea struck him. The next morning, he wrapped his cherished roll rifle in elegant paper and topped it off with a giant bow. He rushed to the hotel and knocked on Nev's door. Her father answered, and seeing the package in Ricardo's hands, he reluctantly invited him inside. Ricardo, nervous but determined, asked if he could give the gift to Nev. After some hesitation, her father agreed, and gently called Nev from the other room. Still half asleep, Nev stirred and saw Ricardo standing there. Her heart leaped. "Rick Roll?" she asked, surprised. "What's this?" With a grin, Ricardo replied, "Nev, a gun, a gift. You up?" An Irishman, an Italian, and a Polish man are on death row, awaiting electrocution. The warden approaches the Irishman first and asks if he has any final words. The Irishman replies, "I'm innocent. Maybe one day, evidence will prove I was telling the truth." The warden sighs and says, Yeah, that's what they all say. But I'm hoping you'll say something meaningful to give the victim's family some closure." They strap the Irishman into the electric chair and throw the switch. Nothing happens. The executioner jostles the handle and throws the switch again. Still, nothing. The warden steps forward, astonished. "That's 1,000,000 to 1 chance. But you know the rules. You survived, so you go free." The Irishman jumps up, shaking the warden's hand. "See, I told you. God saved me because I'm innocent. From now on, I will dedicate my life to doing good works and spreading his word. Thank you, sir, for giving me this second chance." Next, they bring in the Italian. The warden asks if he has any last words. The Italian says, "I a innocent, you a make a big mistake." The warden rolls his eyes. "Yeah, I've heard that one before." They strap the Italian into the chair, throw the switch, and nothing. They try again. Still nothing. The warden, now utterly shocked, steps in and says, "This is incredible. Twice in a row. It's got to be 1,000,000,000 to 1 chance. This must be a sign from God that you're telling the truth. I'm sorry for doubting you. You're free to go." The Italian, tears in his eyes, stands up and exclaims, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. I was so scared, but luck has smiled on me." Finally, they bring in the Polish man. The warden asks, "Do you have any final words?" The Polish man looks around, then points at the electric chair and says, "Yes, but first, look, that chair's unplugged." A man with no arms, no legs, and no torso decides to celebrate his 21st birthday at a bar with his family. Excited to finally try a beer, he sits down and the bartender pours a beer straight into his mouth. To his amazement, as the beer touches his lips, he begins to grow a torso. Overwhelmed with joy, the man decides to order another beer. The bartender pours again, and this time, an arm starts to form. Thrilled, the man takes the beer himself and continues to drink. With each new beer, he grows another arm, then legs, and soon he's standing there with a full, functioning body. Elated, the man who had never known what it was like to have a body decides to make the most of it. He jumps up and starts running out of the bar, racing toward the street. But before he can even get 5 seconds out the door, a truck barrels down the road and hits him, instantly killing him. The bartender, shaking his head, turns to the man's family and says, "He really should have quit while he was ahead." An environmentalist was giving a passionate speech to a packed auditorium. "If we continue on our current path," he warned gravely, "all life on Earth, every man, woman, and child, will be gone in 50 years. Suddenly, a man in the audience leapt to his feet, eyes wide in panic. "What? What did you just say?" The speaker repeated calmly, "I said 50 years. The man let out a huge sigh of relief, sat back down, and said, Oh, thank God. I thought you said 15.